It was a crisp October afternoon in Maine. The kind where the air smells of salt and fallen leaves. My daughter, Lydia, showed up at my doorstep with a bottle of red wine. Her smile as polished as the glass in her hand. "For you, Mama," she said, her voice sweet as the berries in my garden. "It'll help you unwind." She set it on the kitchen counter, right next to the old ceramic bowl Walter used to keep his bookbinding tools in. I'm Eleanor, 72 years old, a retired seamstress who spent decades stitching dreams into wedding dresses. My hands, knotted with age now, still know the weight of a needle. But that day, they trembled, not from arthritis, but from something heavier. Just yesterday, I'd been sorting through a pile of mail, the usual clutter of seed catalogs and electric bills, when I found it, a letter from the bank, tucked away like a secret. My name was at the top, but the words below it made my heart sink. A home equity loan. 6 figures, taken out in my name. Lydia's signature was scrawled at the bottom, bold as brass. I looked at her, standing there in my kitchen, her dark hair pulled back, her eyes darting to the corners of the room like she was measuring it. This house, small and sturdy, was Walter's pride. He built it, board by board, his hands leaving traces of sawdust and love in every beam. Lydia grew up here, chasing fireflies in the backyard. But now she was circling it like a stranger. "You shouldn't be alone out here, Mama," she said, her voice too soft, too careful. "This place is a lot to manage." I nodded, murmured a thank you, but I didn't touch the wine. Something in her eyes, Walter's eyes, but colder, told me to wait. I thought of the little glass jar I used for my embroidery threads, tucked away in the drawer. When she turned to admire the view of my berry garden, I poured a bit of that wine into the jar, sealing it tight, just in case. "You look tired, Mama," Lydia said, her smile tightening. "Maybe you should rest." I smiled back, my lips steady, my heart anything but. "Maybe," I said, my fingers brushing the jar in my pocket. I wasn't tired, not yet, but I was awake. And sweetheart, when you've spent a lifetime threading needles through silk, you learn to see the tiniest snag before it unravels everything. This house has always been my sanctuary, tucked away on the edge of a quiet Maine town where the sea hums and my berry garden thrives. At 72, my days as a seamstress are behind me, but my hands still carry the memory of stitching wedding dresses, each one a tapestry of someone's hopes. Brides would come to me, their eyes sparkling, and I'd weave their dreams into silk and lace. These days, my fingers are slower, knotted with age, but my eyes haven't lost their sharpness. They catch things, the way a thread frays, or the way my daughter's smile doesn't reach her eyes anymore. This place was my husband's gift to me, built board by board before he passed 12 years ago. He was a bookbinder, a man who could make stories live in leather and paper. His bookshelves line our living room, their edges softened by time, holding the smell of ink and sawdust. Every corner of this house holds him, the creak of the floorboards, the rocking chair he carved when our daughter was born, the way the light hits my berry garden just so. I tend those bushes like their family, their red and black berries gleaming like jewels. It's a simple life, modest, but it's mine, I thought. Once, it was ours. My daughter, 40 now, is a freelance marketer, all sleek words and sharper ambition. She used to be my little helper, trailing me with scraps of fabric, giggling as she pinned patterns and called herself my apprentice. But somewhere along the way, maybe after her divorce, maybe after her business deals fell apart, she changed. Her calls stopped coming, her visits vanished. When I broke my wrist 3 winters back, she didn't show. When the roof caved under a nor'easter's weight, I climbed up there myself, hammer in hand, cursing through the cold. I told myself she was caught up in her own life, that grief or struggle had pulled her away. But deep down, I knew, her heart had turned, like thread tangled on a spool. Last week, she came back, that bottle of wine in hand. Her voice too smooth, like the ads she spins for a living. She looked around my house, her gaze lingering on the bookshelves, the garden, the land itself. I'd seen that look before, in clients who'd haggle over every seam, wanting more for less. She was after something, and it wasn't me. Sweetheart, when you've spent a lifetime reading people through their silences, you know when something's about to unravel. My dearest friend, 69, a retired accountant, has a mind that cuts through numbers like my old shears through cloth. She worked ledgers the way I worked lace, finding truth in every line. She never warmed to my daughter, not since she was a girl sneaking coins from my sewing box. That child's always chasing a profit, she'd say, her voice low but kind. She lives a mile down the road, her cottage smelling of lavender and old books. When I showed her that bank letter, her eyes sharpened. We'll get to the bottom of this, she said, and I believed her, because in a world that feels smaller every year, she's my compass, reminding me I'm not as alone as I sometimes think. I stood in my garden that morning, my fingers brushing the thorny leaves of my berry bushes, their sharp pricks grounding me. The house stood quiet behind me, but it felt alive, watching. Those bookshelves, my old sewing table, the life we built, they weren't just things. They were us, and I'd be damned if I let anyone pull that thread loose. The wind off the Maine coast was sharp that week, rattling the windows of my little house like it was trying to tell me something. I stood in my berry garden, the thorns pricking my fingertips, and thought about Lydia, my daughter, who used to braid daisies into her hair right here, was now a stranger with a bottle of wine and a smile that didn't fit. I'd raised her to be bold, to chase her dreams like I chased mine with needle and thread. But somewhere along the line, her dreams turned sharp, cutting into me. That bank letter, with its cold numbers and her signature, sat heavy in my chest. It wasn't just money she was after. It was this house, Walter's house, the life we'd stitched together. I kept going back to the day my husband died. 12 years ago, the world felt like it cracked open. Lydia stood beside me at his funeral, her hand on my arm, promising she'd be there, but then she was gone. No calls, no visits. When my wrist broke, I waited for her to show up, to drive me to the doctor like she used to when she was a girl. All eager to help. Nothing. When the roof gave way under a storm's weight, I climbed up there alone, 70 years old, hammering nails in the rain. I told myself she was lost in her own troubles, her divorce, her failed marketing gigs. But that wine, that letter, they told a different story. Sweetheart, when you've spent a lifetime sewing seams, you know when a stitch is coming loose. I took the little glass jar, the one I'd poured that wine into, and drove to my friend's cottage down the road. Her place smelled of lavender and old ledgers, a comfort that settled my nerves. She was a retired accountant, her mind still quick as ever, and she'd never trusted Lydia, not since she was a teenager, slipping coins from my sewing box for candy. I handed her the jar, my hands steady but my heart racing. Something's not right, I said. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and pulled out an old testing kit from her days volunteering at the community health center. We sat at her kitchen table, the kind with lace doilies and a teapot that hadn't changed since the 80s. She dipped a swab into the wine, her movements precise, like she was balancing a ledger. The silence stretched, broken only by the tick of her wall clock. It's not just wine, she said finally, her voice low. There's a sedative in here. Low dose, but enough to make you foggy, confused, if you keep drinking it. My breath caught. I'd known something was wrong, but hearing it was like a needle through fabric, sharp, final. She's trying to dull you, Eleanor, my friend said, make you look like you can't manage. I drove home, the jar tucked in my coat pocket, my mind spinning. Lydia had been calling me Mama more times in one visit than she had in a decade. She'd been hovering, offering to cook, to clean, her eyes always drifting to the bookshelves. The garden, the land. I thought of Walter, how he'd bind books with such care. Each page a promise. This house was his last story. And I wasn't about to let it be rewritten. That night, I found her phone on the counter. She'd left it there, careless, like she thought I wouldn't notice. I'm no tech wizard, but I know how to swipe. There were messages, dozens of them, to someone named T. Vance. I scrolled, my heart pounding. She's alone. One said, house is worth at least $700 with the land. Once she signs the power of attorney, we can push the loan through. She's already slipping, wine's working. I felt the air leave my lungs. Another message, need to move fast. Banks asking questions. I set the phone down. My hands trembling now, not from age but from fury. I thought of the notebook Walter used to keep, where he'd jot down his bookbinding plans, paperweights, leather types, thread counts. It was still in his desk, tucked behind a stack of old invoices. I pulled it out, its pages yellowed but strong, and started writing. Dates, times, what I'd seen, what I'd heard. I wasn't just a seamstress anymore. I was stitching a case, thread by thread. The next morning, I called my old lawyer, Edward. He'd handled everything since Walter passed. A steady man with a voice like gravel and a heart like oak. I need you, I told him, my voice calm but firm. Something's happening. He didn't push, just said, come by tomorrow. I hung up and stood in my garden, the berries glowing red in the dawn light. Lydia was still asleep in the guest room, her suitcase half unpacked like she already owned the place. I slipped a tiny recorder, one Walter used for his binding notes, into my apron pocket. It was old, but it worked, its red light blinking like a heartbeat. I tested it, whispering, she thinks I'm fraying, but I'm still here. The words came out clear. I smiled, just a little, because sweetheart, when you've spent a lifetime mending tears, you know how to hold things together, even when they're falling apart. By noon, I was back at my friend's cottage, showing her the messages I'd copied by hand. She read them, her lips tight. We need more, she said, something they can't deny. She pulled out her own notebook, the kind she'd used to track budgets. And we started planning, a call to the bank to confirm the loan, a visit to Edward to lock down the deed, and that recorder, always running, tucked away like a secret stitch. Lydia came home that evening, all smiles, offering to make dinner. You should rest, Mama, she said, her voice dripping with concern. I nodded, played along, but my eyes never left her. I saw the way she lingered by Walter's desk, the way her fingers brushed the drawer where the deed was kept. She thought she was clever, but I'd been threading needles longer than she'd been alive, and I wasn't about to let her cut the fabric of my life. The days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. Lydia lingered in my house like a shadow, her voice all honey as she offered to make coffee, tidy the kitchen, or help with my bills. But I saw her eyes, always drifting to Walter's desk, to the corner where I kept the deed to this house. My berry garden outside stood quiet, the bushes heavy with fruit, their thorns sharp as my thoughts. I'd spent a lifetime stitching seams, making things whole. Now, I was stitching something else, a plan to keep what was mine. I played the part she wanted. I moved slower, let my hands tremble when I poured tea. Let my words trail off like I was losing my thread. Oh, Lydia, I'd say, rubbing my temples, this house is getting to be too much. Her smile would tighten, her eyes gleaming like she'd already won. She didn't know I hadn't touched her wine. She didn't know I'd been writing in Walter's notebook. Every date, every word she said, every glance at the bookshelves where the deed lay. She didn't know about the recorder in my apron pocket, its red light blinking like a heartbeat, catching her late-night calls to that T. Vance. She's slipping, I heard her whisper once, her voice low outside my window. Won't be long now, sweetheart. When you've spent decades threading needles, you learn patience. You learn to wait for the right moment to pull the stitch tight. I invited Lydia to stay through the weekend. Said I was thinking about the future. Her eyes lit up, and she started talking about selling the house. About how I'd be better off in a smaller place. Somewhere easier. I nodded, let her think I was fraying at the edges. But every night, I'd slip into Walter's study, check the recorder, and add to my notes. I'd called Beatrice, my old friend, the accountant with a mind like a steel trap. She'd been digging, too, calling the bank, confirming the loan in my name was real and illegal. We've got enough, she said one morning, her voice steady, but we need her to slip up. Eleanor, something undeniable. I decided it was time. I told Lydia I wanted to have a proper dinner. Just the two of us. To talk things over. I called Beatrice and Edward, my lawyer, and asked them to join us. Bring your cobbler, I told Beatrice, winking through the phone, and maybe that old ledger of yours. Edward, who'd handled every legal knot since Walter passed, just said, I'll bring the papers. Lydia didn't blink when I mentioned company. Sounds lovely, Mama, she said, but I saw her jaw tighten. Just a fraction. She hadn't planned for an audience. That morning, I left a folder on the coffee table, labeled House Plans, in my careful script. Inside, nothing but old seed catalogs and a recipe for berry jam. But it looked official, heavy with promise. I watched from the kitchen as Lydia peeked inside. Her fingers quick, her smile smug. She thought she was steps ahead. I let her believe it. I spent the day in my garden, pruning the berry bushes, their thorns catching my skin like little warnings. The air smelled of salt and earth, and I felt Walter's presence in the wind, steadying me. Dinner was set for 6. I laid out the good china, the plates Walter and I used for special occasions, their edges chipped but warm with memory. The table glowed with candlelight, and the smell of roast chicken and cornbread filled the house. Beatrice arrived first, her plum sweater bright against the dusk, carrying a peach cobbler and a purse big enough to hide a secret. Edward came next, his suit pressed, his voice calm as ever. Lydia greeted them with her marketer's charm, all smiles and small talk. But I saw her hands fidget under the table. We ate, laughed, passed the cornbread. I let Lydia carve the chicken, let her feel like she was in charge. Then, as the candles flickered, I set down my fork. I've been thinking, I said, my voice soft, like I was sharing a secret. About the house, about what comes next. Lydia leaned forward, her eyes hungry. Beatrice folded her napkin. Edward reached for his pen. I'm not leaving this place to you, Lydia, I said, my words clear, cutting through the quiet. I'm giving it to the Maine Heritage Trust, in Walter's name. To keep it safe, forever. The room went still. Lydia's face froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Mama, what? She stammered, her voice cracking. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not my little girl but a woman consumed by greed. Her hands already reaching for what wasn't hers. It's what Walter would have wanted, I said, to preserve this place, these bookshelves, this land. She tried to argue, her words tumbling out, too fast. You can't do this. It's not legal. Edward slid a folder across the table. My signature already inked, notarized that morning. It's airtight, he said, his voice like gravel. Lydia's face drained of color. And that's when I poured the wine. Her wine, from her bottle, but with a twist of my own. Beatrice had helped me, slipping me a small vial of a legal sedative. Just enough to loosen a tongue, blur a mind. I'd added it to Lydia's glass. Not mine. She drank, her hands shaking now, her words slurring at the edges. You're making a mistake, Mama, she mumbled, rubbing her temples. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Let's talk about that loan. Lydia, the one you took in my name. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. I pulled the recorder from my apron pocket, pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, crisp and damning. From a call I'd caught 2 nights ago. She's confused. Vance. Once she signs the power of attorney, the house is ours. The loan's already in place. Lydia lunged for the recorder. Clumsy, her hands fumbling. You set me up, she slurred, her voice breaking. No, sweetheart, I said, my voice cold as the Maine wind. You did that all by yourself. The front door opened, and a woman stepped in, her badge glinting in the candlelight. A financial investigator, Beatrice's contact, here to ask Lydia some hard questions. Edward handed over the folder, bank records, my notes, the recorded calls. Lydia's eyes darted, wild now, but the wine had dulled her, left her defenseless. The investigator's voice was calm. Final. Miss Harper, you need to come with me. I stood, my hands steady, and watched them lead her out. The candles flickered, the bookshelves stood silent, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not grief, but clarity. Sweetheart, when you've spent a lifetime stitching broken things, you learn how to cut the thread when it's time. The house was quiet the next morning. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm. The candles from last night's dinner had burned low, their wax pooling on the good china plates. Lydia was gone, led away by the investigator, her suitcase still sitting by the door, half unzipped, like she'd thought she'd stay. I stood in my kitchen, the smell of salt and berries drifting through the open window. My hands, steady now, traced the edge of Walter's notebook, its pages full of my careful notes, dates, words, truths. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just felt free. I packed a small bag, just a few clothes, Walter's old fountain pen, and a sprig of my berry bushes, its thorns wrapped in cloth. I drove to my friend's cottage, her little place by the Maine coast where the sea sang and lavender grew wild. She'd left a key under the mat, a note on the table. Rest. Eleanor. It's done. I settled into her spare room, the bed creaking under me, and for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming. The weight of Lydia's betrayal, the loan, the wine, it was gone, carried away like leaves on the tide. I spent the next day in her garden, tending her succulents, their plump leaves cool against my fingers. I thought of Walter, how he'd bind books with such care, each one a story he'd never let unravel. This house, our house, was his last chapter, and I'd kept it safe. Not for me, but for him. I'd signed the papers with Edward, giving it to the Maine Heritage Trust, to preserve the bookshelves, the berry garden, the life we'd built. Lydia would find nothing but her own consequences now, a file of her own words waiting in some office, as cold and final as the bank letter she'd tried to hide. I opened Walter's notebook one last time, its leather cover soft under my touch. I wrote a final entry, my pen steady, October 18th. The thread is cut, the house is safe, I am enough. I closed it, set it on the nightstand, and walked out to the porch. The sea stretched before me, silver under the moon, and I felt something bloom inside me, not anger, not sorrow, but peace. Sweetheart, healing isn't about holding on to what's broken. It's about letting it go, letting the pieces fall where they may. Family isn't just the ones you raise, it's the ones who stand by you, who see you when the world looks away. My friend, with her sharp mind and lavender-scented cottage, was my family. Edward, with his steady hand and quiet promises, was my family. The berry bushes, the bookshelves, Walter's memory, they were my family. And I was enough. I stood there, the wind tugging at my shawl, and whispered to the night, "You did good, old girl," because sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Not with tears or speeches, but with the soft click of a door behind you. The sea kept singing, and I listened. My roots were deep, not in that house, but in me, and sweetheart, they'd never been stronger.